In 1769, Napoleon Bonaparte was born on the isolated shores of Corsica. Decades later, he would dictate the borders of a sprawling continental empire, bending kings and emperors to his will. His ascent required highly specific conditions. In the late 18th century, the French Revolution tore the nation apart, executing its monarchy and plunging the state into chaotic factionalism. This created a massive vacuum of political and military power. Napoleon recognized the opportunity. Applying severe military discipline and a sharp tactical intellect, he rapidly climbed the ranks of the fractured French army, winning crucial battles and securing the loyalty of his troops. By the time he reached the age of 30, he had leveraged his military successes to outmaneuver rival politicians, establishing himself as the undisputed absolute leader of France. When a society experiences profound collapse, the resulting instability removes traditional barriers to power. For a supremely ambitious individual, a shattered nation provides the ultimate ladder. Once in control, Napoleon applied his tactical mindset to domestic policy. He set out to overhaul the decaying institutions of the French state, replacing aristocratic privilege with standardized bureaucracy. This is the official Code Napoleon. Promulgated in 1804, it dismantled feudal laws, replacing them with a single, modernized legal framework. As the empire expanded, this state-sponsored system was exported across borders, its principles of civil liberties heavily influencing civil law across the globe. He continued to modernize the nation's infrastructure. He established secondary schools, standardized the tax code, and rebuilt roads and bridges. During these early years, his ambition functioned as a stabilizing force. He successfully organized a chaotic, post-revolutionary society into a functional, modern state. But stabilizing France did not satisfy his drive. Napoleon's focus shifted outward, aiming to project his authority and integrate neighboring states under his direct control. Through a series of rapid, aggressive campaigns, his forces systematically dismantled the strongest royal armies on the continent. Time and again, he outmaneuvered larger coalition forces using speed and concentrated artillery fire. This 1812 map illustrates the vast expanse of the French Empire at the height of Napoleon's power. From the Iberian Peninsula, across the Italian states, and into Central Europe toward the Russian frontier, he ruled or influenced nearly the entire continent. The relentless drive that built this empire was now mutating. Confident in his invincibility, his ambition transitioned into an unchecked hubris that ignored logical boundaries. In 1812, aiming to force compliance with his continental blockade against Britain, Napoleon made the strategic decision to invade Russia. He mobilized a massive force, marching over 600,000 soldiers eastward. As winter approached, the environment turned lethal. Temperatures plummeted, heavy snow buried the landscape, and supply lines instantly broke down. The logistical failure triggered devastating secondary effects. Without basic supplies, soldiers faced severe food scarcity, leading to mass starvation and rampant outbreaks of typhus across the freezing camps. During the brutal winter retreat from Moscow, men trudged through freezing winds and deep drifts, collapsing from exhaustion and exposure along the route. This chart tracks the scale of the human toll. The massive starting block of 600,000 troops rapidly collapses down to a tiny sliver. Only a fraction of the men who entered Russia made it out alive. The Russian disaster destroyed Napoleon's military capability and permanently shattered the psychological myth of his invincibility. Sensing weakness, the previously defeated European powers seized the moment. They formed a united military coalition, surrounding France and closing in on the weakened emperor. In 1814, overwhelmed by the Allied forces, Napoleon was forced to abdicate his throne. His captors exiled him to Elba, a small Mediterranean island, intending for him to quietly fade from history. He refused to disappear. In a highly dramatic move, he escaped the island, landed in France, and rallied his former troops. He reclaimed power in a brief period known as the 100 Days. But the coalition immediately reformed. In 1815, Napoleon faced the combined British and Prussian forces in dense, chaotic combat at the Battle of Waterloo. The engagement ended in total defeat for the French. His army was broken, marking the absolute end of his political authority and his military capabilities. An individual's past successes cannot indefinitely survive against the combined weight of a united continent. Stripped of his power, Napoleon was sent into a second, final exile. He was confined to St. Helena, a remote island in the South Atlantic, where he remained until his death in 1821. He spent his last years isolated on rugged green hills, surrounded by empty ocean, a stark contrast to the massive, continent-spanning battlefields he had commanded for decades. 2 centuries later, historians continue to debate his impact. They weigh the modernization he brought through civil law and education against the immense human suffering and death caused by his endless military campaigns. Did his vision successfully force Europe out of the feudal era? Or does his story ultimately serve as a warning about how dangerous unchecked ambition can become when it loses sight of its limits?